Well, hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us. My name is Hannah Crapeau. I'm the Content Marketing Manager here at Certiport. We're so happy to have you joining us for our fourth and final IT Specialist Academy webinar. Now, please note that this session is a pre-recorded webinar, so we will not be having a Q&A portion today. But if you have questions, feel free to reach out to me, hannah.davis@pearson.com, and I can connect you with our fantastic panelists and experts to be able to talk a little bit more about our subject for today. And we will be discussing together computational thinking. And we're so thrilled to have two of our amazing certified ambassadors here joining us. First, we have Tracy, who is the Department Chair of Information Technology at the National Center for Urban Solutions in Columbus, Ohio. Tracy holds an MBA with an emphasis in technology leadership, a bachelor's degree in information technology, and associate degree in technology. She has 20 years of business background in computer systems management, college study skills, and Microsoft software experience. And she's eager to bring students into the 21st century using enthusiastic and dynamic teaching to help them become lifelong learners. And second, of course, we have Damiano Mastandrea, who is a career and technical education director at the Brooklyn STEAM Center. He manages the CTE portfolio of the school to ensure that they are highly relevant and rigorous. He also strategizes various career readiness approaches through workplace immersion programs supported by data-driven decisions. Damiano is a big believer in changing education as a system that works for everyone instead of the selected few and pursuing education to all corners. His passion for education has led him to earn 3 college degrees, including a doctorate, as well as 26 industry certifications. When he has a free moment, Damiano likes to write short stories, play games, and if he's feeling daring, bake, which I must say I really appreciate. And we're so privileged to have both of you joining us today. So before we dive too far into our discussion, I wanted to get you guys to introduce yourselves as well. So Damiano, we'll start with you. Do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and your experience with teaching?
Yeah, sure. So this is my 10th year of teaching, and I love what I do. I teach at both the secondary level for 11th and 12th graders, and I even teach at the college level, undergraduate and graduate. So there's a full spectrum of support there in like seeing into the vision of what education can do. And I just really feel empowered by what certifications and additional education can do for people, especially when it leads to economically mobile or career workforce readiness that provides them with an alternative way to succeed. I could go on, but I'm just happy to be here and glad to talk about the important aspects of computational thinking.
Awesome.
So on to Tracy, I believe.
Yes, please. Tracy, can you introduce yourself as well?
Yes, thank you, Damiano. My name is Tracy Seegers. The students and staff, they call me professor. By evening, I always say that's where I am a professor. I teach at a collegiate level part-time. I've been in the teaching field probably for over 25 years. I have been an IT director, everything from a classroom teacher to an IT director, now to the IT department chair. And one of the things that kind of lured me back was the availability to be able to connect with students again. And so you just, even though when you come out of it, you kind of, it's a great space to be because you don't have all the rigorous environment, but I don't know, being an IT director, it gets rigorous when they're calling you at 3, 4 in the morning also. And so I'd rather do it during the day with the students. And so what we do here at NCUS, we have 4 charter schools, and we also have 2 career colleges. And so I serve as the IT department chair for the career college, which allows me to still interact with our dual enrollment students from the 11th and 12th grade, where we actually do a lot of our certification and credentialing at that level, and allowing students to earn not only industry credentials, but their credits to graduate. So that's a really nice plus. We have certified over 150 students within the last year. Underneath our umbrella, oh yes, Damiano, I know you love that. So have some awesome instructors that teach, have a heart for the students, and just really excited. In my spare time, I like to do motivational speaking, like I have spare time, and I'm also an author as well, but it still kind of breaks the monotony. And I'm so excited to be an ambassador this year, and I just thank you for being here for the opportunity.
Well, we are so happy to have you both, and I could not pick 2 more enthusiastic people to have on this webinar. We're so excited. I wanted to talk a little bit, we introduced our topic, and I know both of you are super familiar, but for those who are maybe joining this webinar to learn a little bit more, can you talk to us about what is computational thinking? What does that mean? So Damian, I'll kick it over to you to get us started.
Yeah, sure. From my perspective, computational thinking is that level of abstraction, that part where you're trying to figure out how a system or a program does something without, being able to explain it word for word, or in a computer, bits, ones, and zeros. So that's like everything from like collecting the necessary information to be successful, figuring out patterns, and like really thinking about how can I automate this or enable it to solve my problem. Computational thinking for me is really about infusing logic into the purpose of what you're doing, so that way it works every time appropriately for the way that you've designed it. The last final piece I'd add on to computational thinking is it shares a lot of roots in math and programming, which is where a lot of people find like a correlation between the two. I do think that logic is directly related to those things, and one is a prerequisite for the other. But logic as a skill on its own precludes those two things. And so, in its totality, I would say computational thinking is logic applied to computing.
I love that. Such a succinct definition. Tracy, did you have anything that you wanted to add to that?
As he was speaking, for me, what it means is what makes sense. And when I think about that, I think about us IT gurus or IT people, when we never can let anything go until we figure out why it's not working, how it works, what did we do wrong, why is this program not running right. You will see us multiple times endlessly spending hours trying to fix one thing, because our minds are continuously in a computational thinking pattern, as Damiano said. And so that's what it kind of means to me, just making sense. I was thinking about also, if you see a table, the best way I can describe it is you go to your parents or your family reunion, and there's just tons of dishes on the table, tons. And you got to kind of muddle through to kind of figure out, where's my favorite dish? What's going to work for me? And you don't want your food to stick together, so you put it all separate. It's kind of like programming a little bit in my mind, because it all kind of comes to you, and you got to kind of get it apart to get to what you really want to eat, how you really want it served to you. But you got to think through it, because you got to start at the beginning of the table to get to the end of the table. Pray that somebody doesn't eat what you want or take your code to make something work. So that's kind of, in layman terms, I think he said it best logically, but when I think about it in layman terms, what makes sense? How does it work? And why isn't it working?
So I'm gonna press a little bit more on you, Tracy, in thinking about why this is important to you and your profession. Why do you think that this is important for today's students?
I know it's important because our students aren't challenged. And I've watched a lot of students kind of just be given an answer as opposed to think through the process of it. And in life, once you get beyond the doors of any high school or college, you're going to be pressured to think about, what was the solution to this problem? If I just give it to you, then you never know the solution to it. And I think it challenges them to think. And I believe that those type of things and those concepts that we put into their mind, it flourishes over into them as they go through adulthood. Because now I have to think through things. I often tell my daughter that, think through it. How is it going to affect? What's the outcome? What's the end result? Will it be a domino effect if you write a code that's going to make the whole system crash, in that perspective. So I think just making sure that we challenge them to think outside the box, don't stay in it, think around the box, create a new box. I think it's important, because those type of characteristics, those type of lessons, they carry on out throughout life.
Yeah, it's not a set of skills that applies just in one situation, right? Being able to think in the more abstract realm is so applicable to any type of career path, being able to find creative solutions. So I love that. Damiano, did you have anything that you wanted to add to that as well?
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. And I would also just add that the process is as important. So as we look into classrooms nowadays, there's a lot of space for instructors to ask their young people, like, why did you come to that conclusion? How did you arrive at it? And offering places for other students to like offer their juxtaposition, like their counter argument or their reasoning to come to an answer. I know that I've taught lessons before where it's like, I pose a question and then some student answers and I pick another person and, I don't give any indication which one of them was right. And it's a question of like, okay, well, how are we going to figure this out? And I can tell you, like, thinking through like the computational assessment, like thinking through like the process of how these things work is so important because you can get the end result. Like you could get the end result like you would with a math equation, but you might miss through the process. So I would just say that like the product is equal to the process in computational thinking, because if you're not thinking of the design as it goes throughout, you aren't future-proofing yourself either. So if the system is ever upgraded or, from a programming lens, if you're going to add a new feature, but you don't think about that in the past, now you're going to have to rewrite the whole thing for the future. And
Yeah.
that's not fun for anybody.
Yeah. I was just taking some notes as you were talking too. I love that the product is equal to the process. And I think that that's the direction we've been wanting to move education to for a long time, is not just creating robots who can give us the answer to a very specific question, but be able to think about their learning more holistically and the applications and importance of being able to use that knowledge in different situations. So in thinking about that, those skills that we want students to be able to have, how do you infuse this type of thinking into your classroom? And Damiana, we'll start with you. I know you teach multiple different types of students. So tell us how you use that maybe in a K-12 and in a higher ed setting.
I think part of the process that we use is project-based learning. Like as you progress towards this end result, the journey is just as important, and ensuring that the problem you're addressing for that project isn't one that you as the teacher hold all the answers. You might have the stepping stones, you might have the benchmarks, but realizing that you can learn together and figure out something new is really cool. And on top of that, when you're really trying to press the point of thought, it's like articulating that in a variety of ways. You might use like a product, like a collaborative whiteboard or something for young people to illustrate their thoughts. They might do like, milestone presentations or, just very classic math, show your work. But being able to articulate what you're doing is really important. At the higher education level, I feel that's more product oriented and reflection. I know that some people may have dreaded the days when maybe they logged into their learning management system and their professor was like, all right, post and then like comment on other people's things. And like, I laugh at it too, because I've done it for years as a student, but as a professor, I was like, this isn't working for anybody. Like saying that I agree to your post doesn't really help me. So like what I do for that is I give directions of what comments have to be about. So if you're making a syllabus, like your comments need to be an evaluation of whether or not it effectively articulates the objectives. For a course where we're doing something a little bit more like thought-provoking, like analyzing labor market data to decide whether or not you found a CTE program, one of those career and technical education pathways, like they come up with a presentation, they present it, and then they're challenged with tough questions to say, why should this exist? And, it's a defensive move because, you have to think on your feet. But it's going to be one of the hardest things you ever have to think through in a classroom. And if you can do that in a classroom, you can do that in an office space. And that's what it's all about.
Well, and I love that you're putting them in what is essentially a very difficult situation, right? Forcing them to think through something very complex, but it's a much more safe space to do it in a classroom than it is to do it, like you said, in a workplace. So if they can thrive doing it in a classroom, that sets them up for so much more success when they go into the workforce. So I think that that's a wonderful approach. Tracy, did you have any thoughts? How are you using this in your institution in Ohio?
So one of the things that we found, and I'll just start from the K through 12 perspective, although we're 9 through 12, through the thinking process, because we first have to make sure that our students have a thought pattern for what we are actually asking them to do. And so one of the things that we do is with those benchmarks that Damiano speaks about, we celebrate them at each benchmark, which really kind of infuses them to want to go further. And so once they get that one level, they're like, oh, I want to do this. I want to get this. I want to get that. And so then they have to really start thinking about, how do I get there? Why do I want to get there? And how do I get there? What are the next steps? And so we want to get them excited about moving through this thought process, and that keeps that retention there. What we have found is that if we're not celebrating it, it's kind of like, oh, okay, yeah, I got there, but you're not explaining it. You're not asking those critical questions. Okay, now that you're there, how did you feel about that? What made you want to get there? There's other times when I use this, we also use it as a way to figure out what's going on with the student. Because sometimes when you're presenting them with a solution or a problem that they have to get to a solution and they're very upset, some of the questions may come, okay, let's stop because you're not doing really well. Did you eat breakfast this morning? No, I didn't eat breakfast this morning. I'm hungry, Professor Seegers. Well, let me get you something to eat, And so, but those type of things kind of help us move them through that progression step by step by step. One of the things, one of the programs that I know we use is it's a Python coding game. And that Python coding game allows students, there's different levels, right? And so the first beginning level is really easy. You have your print statements, Damiano, you know about this. And so they get to that, they get through that first level, they earn some coins, and some of the students, they act like it's real money. And so they can use those bits. They're actually Bitcoins for practices and different things like that. But what I have found is that when I'm sitting with them and they're really starting to think, they're like, wait, no, I have to get it this way. I have to write it that way. And now they're starting to think about some of their foundational learning as well. And they kind of bring it all together. So when they are able to display a print statement or see a program run, they're like, oh my God, I got it. And then it's just building confidence. So I use it as a way to build confidence to get the results I want. I would like to say that there was something a lot more in depth that I do for adults, but I have found that some of my adults are just like children. They want to be celebrated too. Mm-hmm. So one of the things that we do, and a lot of my professors do, we do a lot of encouragement. We do a lot of when our staff and our PD, because our staff has to be certified also. All throughout our whole organization, we offer these trainings. And so we use these concepts even with staff, because what we have found is that even if you're in a job that you do that has nothing to do with computer science or technology, you still have to have a thought process to get to a solution. And so I like to use these skills also that way, and infusing them to say, we're solution-based. That's what we always say. So if we're solution-based, how do we get to the solution? What are the steps that you're going to take? You may take a right turn, but you may have to take a left turn. But at the end of the day, what I really like to see is that end result and that confidence being built. And so I like to use these types of things as confidence boosters, but also kind of getting what I want out of it, which is the end result that you understand why you got there in the first place.
Yeah, I just love the idea that it's not just about the answer, because that doesn't serve the young people and the people that we teach. Because if it's just about getting the answer, then that knowledge only applies in that very narrow situation. But if it's about the tools and about learning the skills, then it becomes applicable in a much broader sense, right?
And that's why I said, Hannah, in the very beginning, from my experience, I've experienced just giving student answers does not work.
Yeah.
Because they're not going to get answers through life. They're going to have to figure it out. We're going to have to, especially in the world of technology, if it is assumed that when you gain any type of certification or any type of knowledge, you are the be all end all of it all, and you should know it. But if you have a student who was just given the answers, like Damiano said, they don't know the processes. And so the process, if you don't know that, you can't get to the end product. Yeah. So I definitely agree with that.
Well, so in thinking about how you teach this and why it's important, I know, Tracy, that you've already touched on a couple of resources that you use. What are some other either curriculum or ideas that you use to infuse computational thinking skills into your classroom?
So one of the ones that we have used, it's through, I believe it's called Skills Build through IBM. And I like to use that as a part of the curriculum along with our third-party software with this Gmetrics, where we do a lot of our certifications as well with Certiport. But that has a lot of base foundational quick tutorials, so that when I begin instructing for those certifications and industry credentials, it makes more sense. One of the things that we have found out is that our students don't have foundational learning, not enough of it. And I don't like to build on an empty foundation because it'll crash and burn. So if I'm just trying to throw a student into this beautiful world of certifications and they don't have any experience, and the expectation is for them to work through this and understand it, it makes our jobs a lot harder. The student becomes frustrated. It's not a good experience. And so we like to use those type of tools. We do rely on our facilitators for some traditional foundation. Our math teachers are very big on, hey, yep, they can get this certification, but they need to know these concepts. So we work with those facilitators a lot to make sure that their concepts and the software's concepts matches. So we have literally gone through a credential program and try to align what math options are there, how do they relate, and that's good too when you're talking to parents, because what parents hear is, hey, yep, he got this great certification and it covers an Algebra 2 credit or an Algebra 1 credit, but how, what concepts were there? And so what we try to do so that teaching is holistic and well-rounded, we want to match those things up to what we're teaching or what they're getting and through that certification. So I found that using that with IBM, that's really good. We use something called Word Keys also. We use a lot of that for some of our students who are more challenged in learning. We use something called Study Island, which has really helped. And like I said, what we have to do here in Columbus in our schools is we build foundational learning. And that way, we can speak to these high numbers of success because we have built the foundational learning using those tools.
Well, and I love that you mentioned that your facilitators are some of your biggest resources that you use, right? Because they're able to look at a student, look at their progress and say, I don't know that they're ready for this, or these are the things that they need to learn to be able to get to this point, which is the end goal. Exactly. So being able to leverage your knowledge and understanding of where the student is and where you want them to go, that's worth more, right, than any of these other tools or things that you can bring into the classroom, which I think is awesome.
I agree. Yes.
Damiano, any other thoughts for resources that you think are helpful with teaching computational thinking?
Yeah, it's a tricky question because like at our facility, all of our curriculum is written by our faculty. We have a pretty good stance as to where we need to be and what we need to do. And our team typically refers to building out curricula that is custom. But we have found ways or inroads that we can work with certain organizations or places to make these things come reality. So for example, when we start off our track for full stack development, instead of jumping right into coding, like we are using pseudocode and flowcharts and things like that to explain like simplistic processes, like like how do you make a sandwich? How did you decide to get here today? And then eventually upscale it to things that are more technologically relevant. So one really awesome project that young people do is they have to build their own obstacle course and fly a drone through it. We use Tello drones because they're relatively inexpensive and they have like a good handle on like their general direction for the most part. And so by being able to introduce like the manual controls, ultimately move up to some form of block-based and then revisit it later on after they've learned Python, provides a level of scaffolding that they just wouldn't be able to do with a product that only offers one option. We've used Sphero before, which has a very similar process. They have a robot that can go on a dictated path and it has a variety of levels of engagement, starting with things like blocks and ultimately ending in code. And so that's one of the big things that we're doing. The other big thing is not something we particularly do at my institution, but a thing that I recommend to other people is to look at ISTE standards, the International Society for Technology and Education. They have student standards, teacher standards, and they all support developing to a degree a level of computational thinking, which is ironically what I found out this morning when I took the exam, because the exam objectives are aligned to the ISTE framework. So I was like, okay, double whammy.
I love that you've both shared things that are so different, right? That there are so many options, and teaching this doesn't need to be one specific style. It can be leveraging all these different tools and what works for your students and what's available at your institution. So I think that that's wonderful. And in thinking about that, I know we have wheels turning for a lot of our attendees, but what advice would you share for the educators who are looking to leverage all of these tools, really bring computational thinking into the classroom? Damiana, we'll start with you.
Puzzles, problems. You know, there's no harm in taking extra time to do something right, as opposed to just getting to the end, but also just realize that everything we do in life has a level of strategy or thought that goes into it, and that can ultimately impact your ability to do well in a computational thinking space, whether it's the assessment, a precursor for programming, or some other field. You know, it could be very simple. It could be, you know, you have this list of things and what's the best way to get information out of it. It could be, you know, you're looking at this, you know, chart and you want to know how to best share it with people. That's all computational thinking. You want young people to really think about what it'll take for them to graduate high school in 4 years, come up with, you know, a chart or scope of requirements that they design, and then you map against whatever your district has. All of those things then translate into figuring out the puzzle. How do I, you know, build out that chart? How do I make it look beautiful? How do I graduate? And then ultimately, whether you want to scale that up into something that's a little bit more computer science like, where there's like an algorithm or a filter or a spreadsheet, your call. But the logic that's underlying all of it is what will impact your ability to do that. So that's what I would say. Like, really bring in the problems, give time to explore different things to do with them. And sometimes just remember that there's more than one answer. And sometimes you find a much more effective, or in some cases, a more beautiful answer.
Yeah, I'm always amazed at the power and depth of understanding that our young people have, that they have creative ideas and thought processes that sometimes are something that we've never thought of before. So being able to be flexible in your approach as well, to leverage some of that knowledge that your students are bringing in. I think that's fabulous. Tracy, any final thoughts from you?
I think I put this on my, on the quote I put on my card was, give those destined to be great the least amount of bricks and they will build you a mansion. And one of the things, the reason why I say that is because with the least amount of information, when we start talking about computational thinking, it challenges you to get to build something that's beautiful. And that's what Damiano talked about. And the journey is not, you're not going to see two of the same mansions. Some people will take their bricks apart. Some people will stack them high, and some people will make them in a round circle. But the end result is that you had to figure out a process how to get there. And the result is still the same. There is something that was built that was beautiful. The journey is not easy, but the journey can be beautiful, like he said at the end, because it challenges you to think outside the box, around the box, in the box, take the box apart. But it also makes you understand that there is a process in everything. Everything is solution-based and solution-driven. I tell my colleagues that all the time because they think IT people are weird, and we're looking at them like they're twisted monsters because we're like, why don't you get it? It's black and white. But for us, it is black and white because we understand that there has to be a process to get to everything, and everyone does not understand that. And so I would just tell instructors and facilitators and administrators, just have an open mind and be flexible. I would tell you to get ready for the change, because the way technology is changing, learning is going to be totally different. I do know that colleges are scrambling now. I don't know if you all heard, Intel is coming to Columbus, Ohio. So now we have a lot of our big, huge colleges, The Ohio State University, Columbus State University, scrambling, trying to figure out how do we get credentialing? How do we get, how do we get students to change their thought process of learning? So I would just tell everyone just to be flexible, have an open mind, embrace change, hug it. It'll hug you back. You have no choice. And just make sure that you know that this journey is going to continue. It's not going to end. It'll be continuing after we're all long gone. So make your mark now, set your feet in there and get ready to work.
I couldn't have said it any better myself. And I'm so grateful for both of you taking the time today to talk through this with us. We know that this is such a relevant and important topic. And we really hope, like you said, Tracy, that our educators will embrace this and get ready to move their students into the next step of workforce readiness. So we're so grateful for both of you. And then, as I mentioned before, if you have any additional questions, Damiano mentioned the computational thinking exam in our IT specialist portfolio. So if you have questions about our exam or any of our other products, please feel free to reach out to me, hannah.davis@pearson.com, and we'll be happy to follow up with you. So thank you both and have a great rest of your afternoon.
Thank you for your time. It was a pleasure.